Take a look at this picture. It's of Rogueport from Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. And look at just how much personality is in just this one single picture. All of the colors are pretty dull and washed out. Predominantly, it's all browns and grays with a blue sky that feels like there's smog in the air. This is a grand departure from the typical Mario environment. Even your average ghost house or castle was more vibrant in color. And yet, this is the most colorful picture of a Mario environment we have seen in years. A contradiction that in itself is solved by the idea that color itself is not just color. It's how we use the color to create the world. We can see every individual tile, and that some seem missing or at least covered with dirt. There's even a small area that looks like something was spilled and not cleaned up properly. Even with the picture fully zoomed out, you can see the trash piled in the corners. Windows are broken. The tiles of a house are missing. And there's a fucking noose in the middle of the square! That's so dark! A noose in a Mario game. And yet I would call this place colorful, not just full of personality. It paints the world in a way other Mario games refuse to, and this kind of muted color palette holds through just about the entire game while still feeling vibrant. Now let's look at all of the footage we have of the new Sticker Star game, the entire reason I felt like I had to write this script. Now, I wouldn't say the game looks bad per se, just very bland, and uninspired, and basically completely oversaturated. There are some areas with some really good coloring. I'm actually really happy with how the desert area seems to be all purple. But that's about as good as it gets for a description, as I still described it with just purple. I only mentioned Rogueport's colors to point out how lacking in actual color it is. I went on to describe all of the little details, the dirt and the grit, that the zone actually feels like the seedy underbelly of one of Mario's worlds. This desert, meanwhile, my favorite area shown in the trailers, is purple. The problem is not in itself that they're using bright colors. Bright colors can be wonderful, especially when used to contrast, like Glitzville contrasts just about all of the Thousand Year Door. The sky above is a colorful blue gradient, polka dotted with a reversed gradient. The clouds, you can see the fluffiness with different shades and shapes on the clouds. There's even depth to the clouds at the bottom. All of this complements the casino-like Glitzville, its bright lights shining into the sky, and its golden self popping out. They actively use the bright colors to make a statement about this area, and that's not even saying anything about what happens when you get inside and actually experience the chapter itself. They deliberately made the two styles separate, to mix them even more effectively. Compare this to what we've seen so far with the darker areas in the trailer. Let's go over them in the order we see them, just to contrast them with the generally very bright world we see in the rest of it. The introduction to the transformed Peach is actually a good level of creepiness, but it has a traditional darkness, not the kind of darkness seen in most of the Thousand Year Door. There's candles and the light shining in. We can see where the light falls and the rest of it is shadow. It's actively dark from the lack of light, not the lack of clarity and grit. Turn the lights on, you likely get the same Peach's castle as we always do. Then there's the castle basement itself. A single texture of sand with weird little higher layers here or there that don't feel natural like the dirt of Rogueport. Here though, I can at least say there's some variety in the shades to the wall, even while all parts are clearly lit. But it's still pretty flat, and it all goes downhill when we see a shot of a pyramid area that is given variety not by having variety, but by having areas poorly lit. Though, there is this one stone on the ground that looks like it might be a different color. We then transition into the desert I genuinely like the look of. There is no light source, and yet there's a wide variety in colors of just the environment. Everything has a slight bluish purple shading because it's dark, but you can clearly see differences in parts of the ground, lines within the mountains in the background, and even different color stones within the tower, showing they don't have to be so one note with the coloring, using exclusively bright colors that only look dark because of the lack of light in certain parts. This desert even still looks bright due to the main shade of violet they are using compared to other shades, which ends up playing against the entire point I'm trying to give this game. It's really not all that dark in the end. It's bright and colorful, just no light source. Even the dark side of the dunes will probably light up if in the game we turn the sun back on. Then there's this super short clip of an underground area where Mario is being chased by a wheel. The sections of light become full orange rather than keeping some green like the rest of the area clearly is. I can't really make much more out of how the color is used here in any contrast to the brightness, but this may actually be an area that uses dark colors. We found it, guys! The one area that actually uses generally dark colorization. Too bad it seems to be all just one flat color, like everywhere else. And as far as what I would call darker areas, it ends on a hidden shot of the Origami King's castle. The background has a nice portrait painted look with a dark color, but when we stop the footage where the lightning strikes, it's again due to the lack of light, not a darker shade in itself. And the point is further made when the ground is mostly made up of two giant swaths of color that are flat and have no texture at all. The Thousand Year Door was not perfect in its visual design, but there was a lot more to it and a lot more variety. Even the original game had variety in its textures. That is to say, it had some. I focused so much on color in my tirade against Sticker Star 3 because that's all I can say about the environments. There's color. Large swaths of it placed next to each other. And some good usage of shadow. Take a look at any singular screenshot of either of the original games and look at the variety in the environments. The grasslands of Paper Mario 64 easily beat out a grassland of the modern era, even without taking into account a 20-year difference in technology. You can say more than just green, or blue, or red. You can use adjectives, and a lot of different ones depending on the areas you choose. Sticker Star 3 doesn't look like it has any of this. It's so bland that I want to call it bad, even if it's objectively not bad. It just doesn't feel like the design has any soul. And this is without getting into all of the problems I have with the nuded gameplay, the nuded character designs, and the generally inferior look of this new game compared to a game that is approaching its 20th birthday. But let me leave you with this one last thing to keep in mind when it comes to the style and the design of the game. In the first games, the fact that it was Paper Mario was incidental. There were gags here or there about paper, and in the Thousand Year Door there were some short power-up sections that made use of the fact that he was made of paper. But now, the fact that he is paper is the entire gimmick of the game. Hey y'all, I wrote this in a flurry of sadness and iced tea, and it's pretty rambly at parts, but I felt like I needed to put my own hat into the ring of modern Paper Mario bashing. There's so many more things I could have said about how soulless this game looks, like partners and world choices, but then I'd be beating a dead horse. Plus I'm bad with words. I'm no art major, but I sure never saw anyone focus so much purely on the color palettes of the games, and how something as dull looking as Rogueport has more color and personality than anything we have seen of this new game. But I will stop there before I get going any further. Sorry again I didn't use any actual footage. I don't know how bad Nintendo is still with copyright footage, especially with a game that technically isn't even out yet. So I decided to err on the side of caution. Either way, take care, and may the power of An and Nidhogg's lay waste to your enemies.